So Dr. Strangelove is alive and well in the US. There's an article, The Coming Nuclear Menace, Hypersonic Missiles by Carl Grossman in Counterpunch. And he says the United States is seeking to acquire volumes of hundreds of even thousands of nuclear-capable hypersonic missiles that are, quote, stealthy, end quote, and can fly undetected at 3,600 miles per hour, 5 times faster than the speed of sound. Why so many? A Pentagon official is quoted in the current issue of Aviation Week and Space Technology as saying, quote, "We have to be careful we're not building boutique weapons. If we build boutique weapons, we'll be very reluctant to use them," end quote. The article in the Aerospace Industry Trade Journal is headlined, quote, "Hypersonic Mass Production," end quote. The subhead reads, quote, "Pentagon forms hypersonic industry war room," end quote. On March 19, 2020, the U.S. conducted its first hypersonic missile test from its missile range facility in Hawaii. Quote, "Fast and Furiously Accurate" is the title of the article about hypersonic missiles written by a U.S. Navy officer, which appeared last year on the U.S. Naval Institute website. The piece declares that by, quote, "specifically integrating hypersonic weapons with U.S. Navy submarines, the United States may gain an edge in developing the fastest, most precise weapons the world has ever seen," end quote. Quote, "Hypersonic weapons," end quote, explains the article by U.S. Navy Lieutenant Andrea Howard, travel faster than Mach 5, at least 5 times the speed of sound, around 3,600 miles per hour, or 1 mile per second. They are similar to, but faster than, existing missiles, such as the subsonic U.S. Tomahawk missile, which maxes out around 550 miles per hour, end quote. While hypersonic weapons can carry conventional or nuclear warheads, they differ from existing technologies in 3 critical ways, end quote, writes Howard. First, our 1 kilogram object delivered precisely and traveling multiples of the speed of sound can be more destructive than 1 kilogram of TNT.
The faster you go, the more kinetic energy you have. In some cases, you may not need to put any explosives on it. The kinetic energy of the vehicle itself is sufficient to be able to cause quite a bit of destruction.
Second, the low-altitude paths help mask hypersonic cruise missiles when coupled with the curvature of the Earth, end quote. And so, quote, "they are mostly invisible to many warning radars."
There really are 2 types of missiles emerging: hypersonic cruise missiles and hypersonic glide vehicles. Hypersonic cruise missiles are powered all the way to their targets using an advanced propulsion system called a scramjet. These are very, very fast. You may have 6 minutes from the time it's launched until the time it strikes. So hypersonic glide vehicles are just that. They're a very fast glider.
The way it's launched is they put it on top of a rocket, it re-enters, then it flies on top of the atmosphere. It's like a plane with no engine on it. And it uses aerodynamic forces to maintain stability, to fly along, and to maneuver.
Because it's maneuverable, it can keep its target a secret up until the last few seconds of its flight.
The current types of missile defenses are not adequate to defend against hypersonic missiles.
Our whole defensive system is based on the assumption that you're going to intercept a ballistic object.
A ballistic missile is like a fly ball in baseball. The outfielder knows exactly where to catch it because its path is determined by momentum and gravity.
It's a different scenario. The combination of the maneuverability and the speed makes hypersonic missiles unpredictable and extremely difficult to defend against.
And third, they can maneuver during flight, in contrast with the predictable ballistic missile descent that are more difficult to intercept, if even detected, end quote. Quote, "By offering the precision of near-zero miss weapons, the speed of ballistic missiles, and the maneuverability of cruise missiles, hypersonic weapons are a disruptive technology capable of striking anywhere on the globe in less than an hour," declares the Navy officer. Doesn't this sound like really, really incredibly not only arrogant, but also just proud, proud of this dreadful thing that they're creating, and this situation that, as that the midnight clock that shows the danger that's posed on humanity by humanity. The article also notes that the Russian, quote, President Vladimir Putin unveils 6 new and, quote, what he called, quote, invincible, end quote, hypersonic missiles as part of a March 2018's, quote, State of the Union, end quote, speech. Quote, Russia has successfully tested the air-to-ground hypersonic missile, end quote, named Kinzhal, or Dagger, quote, multiple times using the MiG-31 fighter, end quote. It's, quote, mounting the Kinzhal on its Tu-22M3 strategic bomber, end quote. The article also says, quote, China, too, is working on hypersonic technologies, end quote. See, because the United States is pulling out of all these different treaties, there's 3 treaties they pulled out of now. And this is what happens. Now we have a crazy race, which is going to it could probably end up with just an accident one day, where everybody is so hair-trigger anxious about how soon, how suddenly they might be attacked, that they end up firing a weapon because they think that's what's happening, and then everything goes up in a big mushroom cloud everywhere.
Most countries use some form of what we call an OODA loop when they're making decisions about whether to respond to a threat or not. You observe a threat, you figure out where it's coming from, then decide whether you need to respond, and then act on that decision.
How are you going to shoehorn all those steps into 6 minutes?
There are 2 implications here. The first is that people will become more trigger happy. The compressed time frame to make a decision makes people much more likely to want to be the first strike as opposed to the second strike, because you can't preserve your second strike capabilities. The second implication is that if you can't defend against a decapitation attack, then you have to devolve command and control of your weapons into the field.
To the military rather than to the national leaders. That runs the risk of an accidental strategic war. Another possibility is to disperse your strategic weapons. That runs the risk of the weapons being seized by terrorists. Another possibility is to go to a strategic doctrine called launch on warning. And finally, you can just decide in a crisis that there is going to be a full-scale strategic conflict, and you strike first. None of these options is very good.
The piece concludes, quote, as the tradition of arms control weakens with the breakdown of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces INF agreement, it would be naive to anticipate anything other than full-fledged weapon development by Russia and China in the coming decades. The bottom line is that the hypersonic weapons will determine who precisely is, quote, prompt and, quote, enough in the 21st century conflict, end quote. The U.S., under President Donald Trump, withdrew last year from the INF Treaty, a landmark agreement which had banned all land-based ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges of 310 to 3,420 miles. It has been signed in 1987 by President Reagan and Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev.
Насколько опасно, по вашему мнению, нынешнее противостояние Россия-Запад?
Пока есть особенно оружие и массовое уничтожение, и ядерное в первую очередь, это колоссальная опасность. Причем может это произойти независимо от политических решений. Вот все народы должны заявить, все народы, что ядерное оружие должно быть уничтожено. Это мы будем спасать себя и планету. Я был в Японии и был в Нагасаки. Там до сих пор еще не успокоилось место, на которое были сброшены первые бомбы американцами. А для чего делали, спрашивается, американцы? Чтобы предупредить всех. Слушайте нас, или мы вас вот так, на японский манер, одной бомбочкой. Ну-то я рассуждаю так. А для чего еще бомбят? Боюсь, что не ушли все те, от них мы не освободились. А когда там это вот происходит, то у нас реакция очень острая происходит. В стране, в которой столько было разрушено войной, в стране, в которой погибли миллионы, действительно миллионы людей, это так воспринимать. принимается по-особому, как ни у кого. Когда я стал генсеком и поехал по городам и селам страны, ездил, чтобы пообщаться с людьми, как бы и представиться, и поговорить. Боже, ни о чем мне не пришлось говорить, только об одном. Все говорят: Михаил Сергеевич, что бы там ни было, не хватает еды, будет она, у нас все есть, земли сделаем, того, другого, справимся. Не допустите войны. Я был потрясен. Так народ был, так он пережил эту войну.
The treaty, quote, marked the first time the superpowers had agreed to reduce their nuclear arsenals, eliminate an entire category of nuclear weapons, and employ extensive on-site inspections for verification, end quote, notes the Arms Control Association. And also the US has backed out of the Open Skies Treaty. Basically, the Open Skies Treaty is... it helps reduce the tensions because you have more oversight of what the other side is doing. So they've backed out of that. Hypersonic missiles may be unstoppable. Is society ready? Was the headline of the article in March in the Christian Science Monitor. This piece notes, quote, hypersonic missiles are not just very fast, they are maneuverable and stealthy. This combination of speed and furtiveness means they can surprise an adversary in ways that conventional missiles cannot, while also evading radar detection. And they have injected an additional level of risk and ambiguity into what was already an accelerating arms race between nuclear-armed rivals, end quote. The article raises the issue of the speed of hypersonic missiles miring military decisions. Quote, for an incoming conventional missile, military commanders may have 30 minutes to detect and respond. A hypersonic missile could arrive at the same destination in 10 minutes, end quote. Thus, quote, artificial intelligence, end quote, or AI, would be utilized. The Christian Science Monitor article quotes Patrick Lynn, a professor of philosophy at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, as noting, quote, technology will always fail. That is the nature of technology, and, says the article, quote, Dr. Lynn argues that the benefits of hypersonic weapons compared to the risk they create are, quote, widely unclear, end quote, as well as the benefits of the AI systems that inform them, end quote. It quotes Dr. Lynn as saying wisely, quote, I think it's important to remember that diplomacy works and policy solutions work. I think another tool in our toolbox isn't just to invest in diplomacy to develop community, end quote. I think another tool in our toolbox just isn't to invest in more weapons, but it's also to invest in diplomacy to develop community, end quote. The Aviation Week and Space Technology article begins, quote, as the US hypersonic weapons strategy tilts towards valuing a quantity approach, the new focus for top defense planners, even as 4-year battery of flight testing begins, is to create an industrial base that can produce missiles affordably enough that the high-speed weapons can be purchased in volumes of hundreds or even thousands, end quote. So the weapons industry is just rubbing their hands together. They just love all of this. They love all the saber rattling, and it just, their stocks go up, their sales of weapons go up, and parts. He continues, quote, to pave the way for an affordable production strategy, the Pentagon's Research and Engineering Division has teamed up with the Acquisition and Sustainment Branch to create a war room for the hypersonic industrial base, says Mark Lewis, Director of Research and Engineering, the Modernization, end quote. The piece then quotes Lewis as saying, quote, at the end of the day, we have to be careful we're not building boutique weapons. If we build boutique weapons, we'll be very reluctant to use them. Oh, dang. What a shame. Imagine being reluctant to use them. And that again factors into our plans for delivering hypersonics at scale, end quote. Yes, let's be able to blow up the world thousands and thousands and thousands of times over. The article says that, quote, Air Force and defense officials have been promoting concepts for operating air-launched hypersonic missiles in swarm attacks. The B-1B bomber, for example, will be modified to carry 6 hypersonic missiles. Quote, I think it's poorly posed question. Doesn't this sound just off the wall? Quote, I think it's a poorly posed question to ask about affordability per unit. The piece quoted Lewis as saying, quote, we have to think of it in terms of the affordability of the capability that we're providing. By that I mean, if I've got a hypersonic system that costs twice as much as its subsonic counterpart, but is 5 times more effective, well, clearly that's an advantageous cost scenario. So these are by people who, this is by administrations who can barely budge on giving the public anything during a pandemic. They have to be pushed and shoved and embarrassed and shamed. Doesn't make any difference. They still don't provide the public with what they need during a pandemic, even though the sovereign economy can afford that. But what do they use the sovereign economy for? This sort of nuts, this sort of crazy stuff, this Dr. Strangelove crazy stuff. That's what they spend their trillions of dollars on. They don't spend it on the public because that's what governments are for. This is what governments are meant to be spending money on, the public, not on these ridiculous hypersonic missiles that make it more and more likely that someone's going to make a mistake or that some AI is going to launch a missile because human beings can't counter it soon enough. So we're going to leave things in the hands of artificial intelligence for whether our planet is blown up over and over and over again, and that's the end of everything, including all the non-human animals who have nothing to do with our ridiculously violent species. They have nothing to do with us, and yet, once again, not only are they under the 6th mass extinction because of the climate crisis that we've created, including a use of animal agriculture, but they have to deal with this insane, I can't find another word to, I don't mean to be ableist, but I cannot find another word to call this sort of thing. It's just insane. These people are psychopaths. I don't even think some of them even think about what they're doing. There's no wisdom behind any of it. They're either working for the arms industry, or they've got shares in the arms industry, or they have future careers in the arms industry, which a lot of generals have. They often go and find work elsewhere after they retire from the military. They go and work in the arms industry or something like that. And then you've got the lobbyists who give money to these politicians in the US. I mean, this is insane. And of course, they can use the sovereign economy just like that when they want to spend, billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on these weapons. But then, how are you going to pay for it? That's the old refrain. How are you going to pay for it when it comes to Medicare for all? Even though Medicare for all would save the US $450 billion with a B every year and save 70,000 additional lives on top of the Obamacare thing. And here they are spending money on this insane stuff. How to kill more effectively. How to win. There is no winning in a nuclear war. It's mutually assured destruction. Anyway, so, money's no object, basically, for these nutters. The hypersonic missiles will indeed likely be, quote, invincible, end quote, and they would be at the ready because of the withdrawal by the Trump administration of the INF Treaty and other international arms control agreements one after another. With the vast number of hypersonic nuclear-capable missiles being sought, the world will have fully returned to the madness in the depths of the Cold War as presented in the 1964 film Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Apocalypse will be highly likely. Artificial intelligence is not going to save us. These weapons need to be outlawed, not produced and purchased en masse. And we must indeed, quote, invest in diplomacy to develop community, end quote. A global community at peace, not a world of horrific and unstoppable war. And that's by Carl Grossman, Professor of Journalism at State University of New York College. I don't think I need to make more comment about that. I'm sure if you follow this channel, you probably agree that it is actually whipping up into such a frenzy, and they're using their own created conflicts with China, Russia, and all of that. The US empire is using all these conflicts that they're instigating, that they're creating, that they're saber-rattling towards, and all of that, to then buy thousands of these hypersonic missiles controlled by AI and that could blow the world up over and over again and mutually assured destruction. And this is who we have, basically just making decisions for all of us. This is not something separate what the US does, and I wish that people would take more interest in US politics, because what happens, the people who end up being voted into office, and both sides are very problematic, but these people are the ones that make a lot of decisions for the world. They decide what countries they're going to invade and overtake and overthrow democracies. Over and over again they do this. They want everybody to submit to them, and they also control whether we're going to go up in one big mushroom cloud. They're also going backwards with Australia too. Australia is contributing to this. The terrible climate emergency. Australia is up there with the US in, we're exporting coal here, which is very, very dirty. And the US is actually reversing a lot of what its environmental protections, and has no interest in addressing the climate crisis. These are the sort of people we have, and who votes them into office? Well, we do. A lot of corruption around the actual elections, the general elections, and that's why we need a grassroots movement, a non-violent grassroots movement to address this situation, to have progressive internationalism, as Noam Chomsky mentions. There's a lot of progressive internationalist sort of movements popping up now to confront the authoritarianism and the neo-fascism in the world today. And he said that's a positive and hopeful thing, and I agree with that it is a positive and hopeful thing, and it's up to us, the people, to actually to join in these progressive internationalist movements, because these people who are in power are psychopaths out of control and have no interest at all in turning back what they have in motion. So thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Robertson. By the way, go vegan, because speciesism, sexism, heterosexism, and all the various forms of discrimination, including racism, are all forms of the same ignorance. They're all faces of the same ignorance. They all cause violence, and where you have one, you'll have all kinds. So if we're speciesist, meaning we're not vegan, we are contributing to the terrible violence on the planet, not only to non-human animals, but to humans as well. So thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Go vegan. Till next time. Bye for now.